I don't think I can have a more interesting guest than the one I have today. A getaway driver for the mob, married to the mob, abused wife, model for Kodak, best-selling author of a book called The Company She Keeps, a woman stunt driver, and the owner of a stunt school here in Hollywood, making her way from her roots back in Rochester, New York, all the way to California. This woman has done it all. Like we say, life has a way of changing your plans, the ones we never plan to change. Let's meet Georgia Durante and see what she has to say about her journey to Hollywood, where she's at, and what she's up to now. I can't wait for you to hear her story. Hi, I'm Carrie Morrow. This is my podcast, What the Heck Next? I am so excited to invite my friend Georgia Durante as a guest today. Nobody has a more fascinating story than hers. She started in Rochester, New York, married to the mob, working for the mob, driving for the mob, escaping an abusive situation, making her way to be a beautiful Kodak model, and then other modeling jobs that skyrocketed her, and then working her way across the country to Hollywood as we know it. She was one of the best women stunt drivers and owned her own stunt school, which is beyond impressive. So, welcome, Georgia, to my show. Let's hear
Hi.
all about you.
Well, you know what? This is really strange, and I'm going to send you a little video about this. But I'm from Rochester, New York. Okay, I started modeling there when I was 12 years old. By the time I was 18, 17, really, I became the Kodak girl. And it was the life-size cutout in the blue and white polka dot bikini that was in all the drugstores and camera shops all over the world. Well, the other day, Saturday, if you watch the Oxygen channel,
Yeah, of course.
okay, there was a program on called Confidential Death Row Secrets of a Serial Killer. I'm watching it in my jammies. I'm all cuddled and waiting to get into a good show. All of a sudden, they pull my picture up. This was a picture that was buried by this serial killer. He killed 26 women. And they're trying to figure out, who is this woman? It's got to be significant because he buried the picture and was like trying to hide it. And I'm saying, "Oh my God, that's me," you know. And I recognized the outfit. That was one of my favorite tie shirts, and I had this scarf on. I used to be a hand model. It was my hands. It's like, "Oh my God, that's me." And they're trying to figure out if this woman is dead or alive, and what the significance of him burying this picture. It was like a vocal point of the whole thing. So I got a hold of the cold case
The
detective
producers. Yeah.
that put
Wow.
this all together. And I said, "That picture in your program is me." And I sent him a bunch of my pictures from that time period to prove it was me. Right. So now I think they're going to like change the concept and now reveal that they found that person, but I don't know how they're going to do it because it's already
That's amazing.
pre-done,
So this story just keeps going.
I know. It's my Sony Pictures had optioned my book, my life story, for a hopefully a Netflix series, and they're talking about it being like three seasons. We get the modeling down, we get the acting down, we get the stunt driving down. Then what? My life just keeps going.
Yeah,
It
but
keep-
that's the motto for the show is life has a way of changing your plans, the ones you never planned to change. And
exactly.
and look, I
Yeah.
mean, you're like going, "Okay, my book's done. I've done everything." And no, I guess you haven't. There's
No.
your answer.
Well, what I want to do to end my career is double the woman who doubles for me.
Well, that's just amazing. And you grew up in Rochester, and how did you get into modeling? Was that something your parents encouraged?
I started modeling when I was 12. My mom and dad they owned a golf course, and we used to have dances there on Sundays. And I was at the door checking proof to make sure everybody was old enough to get in. I'm 12 years old, right? and
Yeah.
and one of the photographers from Kodak asked my mother if she would bring me in to, to test. And at the time, I was like a big tomboy. That's the last thing I wanted to do. So she brings me in, and I'm very uncomfortable. They're posing me. It's not like where I wanted to be. I wanted to be playing baseball with the boys. So the photographer comes into the dressing room afterwards, and he says, "Honey, are you taking any secretarial courses in school?" I said, "Well, I plan to." He's, "Oh, good, because I don't think you're going to make it as a model." Somebody told me there was something that I couldn't do, and then I had to prove him wrong. I went home, I bought all these teen magazines, and I started posing in front of the mirror. And then I asked my mother, make an appointment for this other place. So she did. And they put me on the roster. I was modeling all the time. How I came across this serial killer, I'm still trying to figure out what that connection was. He obviously hired me to model, but I can't remember the circumstance.
Is he dead?
Yes, he was on death row, and I don't know if they actually killed him or if he died. He killed 26 women. Most
In
of them,
Rochester?
no,
Like, around
most of
Rochester?
them in California, but at the time in Rochester, 4 women were killed, all with the same first and last name initials. They called him the alphabet murder,
Oh my
and
gosh.
they never caught him. All of a sudden, it stopped. And my girlfriend's best friend that she used to hang with was one of the people that he killed. And they found her body in this abandoned garage that my girlfriend she used to hang out with the kids in that garage. And all of a sudden it stopped. Well, that's when he came to California and continued. All the murderers, the women that he's murdered that they know so far, have all the first and last name initials that are the same. So now they call him the alphabet murder, but they never got him for the Rochester murders.
And so they went through his things and found your photo in there?
But it was buried. It was like a treasure he was keeping.
That's
The only thing I
crazy.
can think of is maybe because I was so known in Rochester, being the Kodak girl. Maybe that was significant to him that he wanted to treasure that. I just don't know.
But the fact that it's risen its head up now
Yes. Yeah.
is
Yeah. So
is
the second
crazy. I love those kind of stuff. You lived in true crime. That was
So, and
your
I also knew
beginnings.
the Hillside Strangler used to come to my house and play cards with my husband. I used to serve them while they were playing cards. Kenneth Bianchi. It's like I've had all these serial killers around me. I mean, I can't believe I'm still here.
Yeah, well, thank gosh. I wouldn't have met you at that party.
That's right.
So, you got out of that and you got to Hollywood, and how stunts?
First of all, almost everybody in Rochester was Italian. Everybody's like, oh. And I used to hang out in the city where all of these mob guys used to hang out. And to me, they were not unusual.
Yeah,
It was like normal. And
right.
I became good friends with Sammy Pigeonjello. They called him Sammy G, and he ended up being kind of the godfather of that area. He watched me grow up, and he would keep the guys at bay, or he'd always watch out for me whenever I was in the clubs. I end up moving to New York after I graduated from high school with 2 other models. And the very first night we're there, we meet these mob guys. We end up at an after hour club. They started using us to bartend because we would make the guys laugh. I'm bartending by myself. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I just set this drink down in front of this guy. He pulls out a gun and he shoots the guy next to him. Guy falls on the floor. Everybody scatters. I was dating the owner. He throws me the car keys. He says, "Georgia girl, get the car, pull it up." I ran down 2 flights of stairs. They got his body down the stairs, threw him in the back seat, and now I'm in the driver's seat. I get him to Bellevue Hospital in record time. I would see a cop. I knew I had to slow down or turn the other way. I was 17. All they talked about was, "Man, Georgia girl, can you drive a car?" They talked about this it seemed like it went on for months. Now I go back to Rochester for a weekend and I run into Sammy G. And Sammy says, Georgia, I need you to do a favor for me. And I said, sure, Sammy, what do you want me to do? He said, you got to deliver a message for me. If anybody finds out about this, you're going to find my body in the Genesee River. He said, I can't trust anybody. I said, okay. So he shows up the next day with a sealed envelope. I fly back to New York and I'm picked up by this black limousine and they drive me into Brooklyn and they escort me into this back room where there's 4 guys sitting. And I'm introduced as Georgie Girl. That's the nickname they gave me. This one guy raised his eyebrows and like he recognized me. I hand him the envelope and he opens it. He looks at me and he says, you tell Mr. Gingello he's going to have to meet with me in person. Now I'm being escorted out. And the guy that's walking me out says, the old man really liked you. And I said, which old man? They were all old. And I was 17, right?
Right. Well,
It turned out it was Carlo Gambino. Guess hearing this story, how I drove the car that night and everything, and Sammy trusting me to deliver this message, they called me and asked me if I would start delivering messages for them. Sure, I'll do that. It started out with me picking up packages like in Utica and different places, but I always would drop them off to these guys in suits at JFK Airport. And I never asked any questions, but I found out later there were millions of dollars in these packages, and those guys were the CIA. They were laundering the money for the mob in foreign countries, right? Which I didn't know at the time, but then it kind of graduated to what they called pickups. I would park around the corner and they would go inside, and I assumed they were breaking legs and doing what they did to collect the vig. But one day they came out with their guns out, flung open the doors, and said, "Step on it." And I heard the sirens in the background. And I knew if I didn't get away, somebody was going to die. And I did. I got away. And then they wanted to use me all the time. And you don't say
were
no to
you
these
being paid?
guys. Oh, yeah. Eventually, mob war broke out. They were killing everybody who knew anything. And I obviously knew too much. And that's when I came to California. I was
Smart.
basically running from the mob. I was running from my ex-husband. He wanted to kill me. And I couldn't really model because they would figure out where I was. And so I'm held up in this friend's apartment. I used to model with him in New York, and he let me stay there until I could figure out what I was going to do. And I'm watching TV every day, and it seemed like every time there was a commercial, it was a car commercial. Then I realized you can never see the driver. I said, that's perfect. I could do that, right? But back in the early 70s, they were putting wigs on guys. Women just weren't doing that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
my friend was an actor, and he'd say, "Well, they're shooting a commercial here," and so I would go down to the location, and I would bug these directors, and they would just look at me like, "Yeah, sure, she can drive." I wasn't getting anywhere with them, but I wasn't giving up. I kept going back, and I kept running into the same director. Finally, he said, "Okay, show up on Tuesday. We'll see what you can do." So I showed up on Tuesday, and I guess he was impressed is he started using me, and then he started telling other directors about me. And before I knew it, I had to turn down work. I couldn't do it all. And that's what
Wow.
gave me the idea that there's such a need for women. At the time they were putting wigs on guys. I said, I got to find good-looking women who can drive. And then I started my company thinking it was going to be all women, but there was obviously more work for men. So I brought men on as well, which I had Bobby Unser Jr. I had Dar Robinson, who was a great stunt man. And I got a team of 16 guys and girls and trained them all in precision. And we came out of the gate, like kind of like what the Blue Angels do in the air, we did on the ground with cars.
Yeah.
And so I went from living in my car when I first got here to a 5,000 square foot home. And it's really kind of a story where you, if you believe in yourself, there's really nothing you can't do, you know? Well,
Mm.
when there's a will, there's a way. And that's what people are getting from this book. But it's also helped many women that are in abusive situations. My ex-husband, it took me a long time to get away from him. He put a gun to my head with one bullet in it and pulled the trigger twice. He held me out of a 2-story building by my ankles because I wanted to leave. People reading it that are in those situations, they don't realize they're really in those situations, but reading what happened to me, they're seeing themselves on the pages, and they're waking up to what's going on with them, and they're changing their lives and doing what they can do to get out of their relationships. I started getting emails from women all over that read the book, and I would try to answer everybody because, I just didn't wanna leave anybody out there hanging. But I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I can only tell how I did it, doesn't mean it was the right situation for them, and I didn't wanna tell them the wrong thing, you know?
Well,
But,
I don't know that people are looking for instructions
yeah.
on how to get out of things. Many times there's like a crumb in the universe that connects with you. I find that with things that I talk about, people will email me or on social media and say, "Wow, you're so smart. Like how did you get into Hollywood? How did you decide to do what you're doing now?"
Mhm.
Something magical about your story and your delivery gives the right person at the right moment the right hope.
Mhm. Yeah.
I've had people come up to me in a lifetime and say, "You have no idea what you said to me back then changed my life." I speak, I tell my story, and then people say, "I was so affected by what you said." And your journey has so many dimensions and so many layers that when somebody can connect with maybe just you, maybe just your spirit. Abuse is a vicious place, and
Mhm.
thank God I didn't live in that world, but I saw it in relationships. And I have a friend who was beaten on a regular basis, and she would not leave him. And then
Well, there's
finally
the fear, the
ran for her
fear.
life. I did a post recently that says, "Do we have a fear of letting go, or do we have a fear of letting stay?" This is a very big difference. There's only 2 choices. You can let something go or you can let something stay.
Oh, just like I'm doing right now with you. It was a radio show, and, they had my book, and it was laying around in the studio, and, I get an email from this girl, and she said she worked at the station. She said, "I picked up your book, and I brought it home and read it," and she said, "If I had not read this book," she said, "I wouldn't be here to be writing you today." She said, "I planned to kill myself this weekend." She said, "But when I read your book," she said, "if you could do it with what you were up against, then I can do it." And then she signed her name with a small N. And I said, "The first thing you have to do is capitalize your name, and then you're gonna get some self-esteem." And then another situation, one of my drivers, he lived in Colorado, and he was on location in, Ohio, and he met this girl, and they started communicating. So he's back home, and he's reading my book, and he's right at the part of my book where my brother-in-law murdered his whole family, his wife, his 4 children, and then he killed himself. And I'm standing in that cemetery looking at these 6 caskets and thinking how that could be me, you know? Well, that's the part in the
Yeah.
book that he's at, and the phone rings, and it's this girl that he met. They're talking, and all of a sudden he hears this banging on the door, and the girl says, "Oh my god, that's my ex-husband, I'll call you back," and she hangs up. So he's sitting there thinking this could happen to her, right? And he waited about 10 minutes, and he calls her, there's no answer. He called again, there's no answer. He got scared. He called the police, and he told them what happened. Then he didn't hear anything. The next morning, he gets a call from the police. And they said, "Are you the gentleman that called us last night?" And he says, "Yes, what happened?" He said, "Well," he said, "we just want you to know you saved that woman's life." He said, "When we got there, we had to break down the door. He had stabbed her several times, but they
Oy.
they got him, and they got her to the hospital in time, and she was living." So
Wow.
that's 2 people I know that their lives have been saved by reading that book.
That seems to be the universal message. Any age will watch it. How many datelines do I have to watch about somebody being killed by their someone?
Yeah, well, always continue. That's the sad thing.
I pray that women learn better. I spent 40 years in Hollywood producing some of the biggest movies. I worked for some really awful people. I mean, where I'd go to work terrified. That would fall under abusive. People who would throw things and scream things and call you names, and I was being paid,
Yeah.
and I was so afraid to
Yeah.
stay and so afraid to leave because Hollywood's a whole other monster. You're not allowed to talk. I did a movie a few years ago where had a friend come visit me at the production office, and he said, "Your hair, you have bald spots. Your hair is falling out from the abuse." The abuse was unbelievable. I think your message is unbelievable.
They just beat you down psychologically that you think you're worthless. And that's basically why you don't think you're going to make it. You start believing everything they tell you. Who's going to want
Well,
you?
listen, I did a job in recent years where the executive, the person funding the movie, called me pathetic.
Oh
Why? Because he didn't want to pay my health insurance, and he said it's pathetic that you even need it.
my
What?
God.
That's right. We're talking about within the past 5 years. This is just a job, I'm gonna get through it. Little
Mhm.
kitty,
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
sweet kitty.
Mhm.
I
She
have
is
my
sweet.
baby here. She's right here sitting next to me.
Uh,
She likes to sit next to me when I'm doing this. What's the kitty's name?
fat cat.
Fat Cat. That's a Fat Cat, that's a
Uh,
mafia name. So, you've come light years, and you tell so many great stories. Were you an agent to stunt people, or you just
no,
had an agency where they would call you?
well, it was a driving team. We were a
Got
team.
it.
So whenever they needed drivers, they would call me. I did the driving, I coordinated, whenever they needed a team, they would call us because team driving is a
Right,
lot different than single people driving.
right.
Because
Of course.
you gotta trust each other. When you're driving like inches off of each other's bumpers, you're just gonna
Mhm.
back off a little bit. You can't just put anybody together like that and make that happen.
What is something that went wrong? I just recently told a story about a stunt gone wrong in a movie I did that
Yeah.
went so wrong. I've been on several movies where some just went bad, but this one went really wrong. What's your story about something that went wrong?
Well, how I actually end up writing the book was I was doing a Bugle Boy jeans commercial up in Bodega Bay. And the scene was the girl drives up to this guy on a Jeep and she looks over and she says, "Are those Bugle Boy jeans you're wearing?" And he says, "Why, yes, they are." And she does a 180 and goes the other way. Well, when I did that 180, the back tire caught the soft shoulder and flipped this Dino Ferrari, 1975 Dino Ferrari over the embankment, and it was heading towards a 300-foot drop off into the ocean. Thank God it stopped 40 feet short of going over the cliff. And I'm under the car and it's dark and I'm trying to find the radio to say, "Get me out of here," right? And I hear this like the gasoline's gonna explode and I can't get out. I'm trapped. They all got down there, they got the car off me, and I'm on the way to the hospital. I was fine. I had a dark wig on, I'm um doubling for the actress, and all the glass was in the wig. It would have been in my head if I didn't have a wig on. Um, the seatbelt, being it was a 75, it didn't have seatbelts. Well, I made them actually put the seatbelts in, but it didn't have a shoulder harness because they didn't have shoulder harnesses then. So, but that actually is what saved me. I was able to scrunch down. Now I'm in the ambulance and I'm thinking, I thought the whole time as I'm somersaulting to my death, all I kept thinking about was, "Oh my God, I'm wrecking a $250,000 car," instead of thinking about my
What
life.
w
I'm laying there and I'm thinking, why was the car important? Why didn't I think of my life or my kids? Why didn't I think about that? So when I got back from location, I went to see a therapist. The therapist suggested that I get a journal and write in it for 20 minutes a day, whatever came into my head, right? So I started doing that and all this stuff started coming out. I mean, I'd never really analyzed my life before. I just kind of
Wow.
went with it and um, Then I started adding dialogue. And I said, this is turning into a book, but I didn't think I could write. So Sidney Sheldon was a friend of mine. So I called him and I said, Sidney, I said, I think I'm writing a book. I said, but I don't know how to write. I said, can you suggest a ghostwriter? So he said, send me what you got. And I had probably about 40 pages of this really raw journal. And 3 days later, after he gets it, he calls me and he says, Georgia, he said, you don't need a ghostwriter. He said, you know how to tell a story. And he said, you have a story to tell. He said, but what I would do, he says, start out, because I just wrote about all these traumatic things that had happened.
Right.
To start out when you were a child, get the reader to know you and love you. So when they get to these parts, they'll forgive you.
That's advice. There you go.
Uh,
That's good advice though. So that was the genesis of the beginning of the book. And
mhm,
and
yeah,
and then it just and then
yeah.
how long did it take you from sort of journal to publish?
3 year it took me 3 years to write the book, and the first publishers who saw it bought it within 23 hours. So, yeah.
Wow. And you're the only writer?
Yeah.
Or did you have a
Well, you
polish?
know
You
what?
did it
They gave me an editor, and she lived in Florida, and
mhm.
so she took, like, the first 3 chapters and ripped them apart because
Hmm.
I have Georgia White and Georgia Black, which was another a voice that came out while I was writing. She says, "Okay, first of all," she says, "you gotta get rid of this Georgia White, Georgia Black." She said, "It's way too confusing." And, all these Italian names, she says, "Figure out who's gonna stay and who's gonna go." I said, "This is a true story. You just don't eliminate people, right?"
Well, the
We're
mob
good.
does.
So, anyway, now the publisher calls me after she ripped apart my first 3, and I'm upset. It's the whole theme of the book. The publisher calls me and he says, "I just got another bill for $3,000 from this editor." So he says, "I called her and I said, I've already paid you. And what is this?" And she says, "Oh no, it's $1,000 a chapter." I had 12 chapters, right? So he calls me and he says, "How do you feel about going this alone?" And I said, "Yes, yes."
Oh,
So I
well, there
wrote
you go.
that's the way I wrote it is the way it came out.
That's brilliant,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be a movie. So it was sold to Sony, who
Sony optioned it. They're actually going out with the writer and the director. So they've got uh, Netflix is the first. They feel that Netflix is going to be the one to get it.
right, and what's your participation in it? You're gonna be an executive
I
producer?
I
You'll
am
be on set every
executive
day?
producer. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll do whatever stunts I can still do. I'm 75 now.
They probably need to preserve you for producing. I don't know how insurance works on at that point. Just sit in the chair and tell us if it's right or wrong. You need to be the integrity producer.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll start out as a period piece? It's
Gonna
a
be
period
talking to
piece.
the writer. She's gonna go over how she's pitching it. So I'll know how she sees the story and how she plans on going forward with it.
I think it would be great as a multi-part, like, limited series.
And for the first
Yeah,
series, the first what do you call that? A series. And
right.
then they have the second series. And they're talking about doing three series. Three what do you call it?
That's
It's
right, right. 3 seasons.
3
3
seasons.
seasons.
Yeah, me too.
Well, do you think they'll shoot it Rochester, LA, or Ohio, which
Well, a
is
lot
big
of
in
it's in New
incentives
York
right now?
City. So,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot in Rochester where you can really do that anywhere to look like Rochester. But New York City, you got to do in New York City,
right.
you know?
I mean, I'm from there, so I
Yeah.
get it. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure they need a fabulous line producer.
Keep it in.
What are you doing something now? What are you up to now?
I ended up adopting a little girl when she was 10 days old, and she's
I
19
love
now.
that. That's it just
Very
seems
busy.
like you're not stopping and so what are your thoughts on the state of affairs in Hollywood? Have things changed in your eyes? Like, do you think it's slowed down, it's
Yeah.
changed, or
Yeah, they're talking well, I'm not out there dealing with it anymore from what they're saying. First of all, when COVID hit, everything shut down basically. Everybody's complaining that it's business is really not what it was. So, like I said, I'm not
yeah,
out there feeling it, you know.
but you hear it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
definitely hear the conversation, and
Um,
I said, it it was interesting to me because when the writer's strike hit in May of 2023, and they're so enthusiastic and they're marching and they're screaming and everybody's supporting them, and I remember saying to friends, "Something's not right." Like, nobody from the studio is chiming in, like, "Calm down, we're gonna fix it." It was silent. Nobody speaking. I was like, "This isn't good." And then here comes the SAG strike, and I was like, "Oh gosh." It's like, didn't they
mhm.
fix that one? Now they got this one? And then they're both marching and they're supporting each other. And then it's almost Thanksgiving, November, before they said, "Okay, it's over." But there was no work. It
Yep.
was at that point, there was no work.
Yep.
People are so afraid, functioning in fear, like, that they would have the opposite. "I'm not gonna be pessimistic. It's gonna be great." But it wasn't, and by the way, it still isn't. And sure, there's work, leaving the country, and there's scattered projects around the country, but N n there used to be 600 to 1,000 productions. I keep saying there's just no instructions for this moment, and we all worked a freelance life. You were freelance, I was freelance, I never knew where my next dollar was
Right.
coming from,
Right.
but guess what? 40 years? Didn't bother me. The phone would ring,
Right.
except the phone stopped ringing. And I have friends that have lost their homes, lost their marriages, lost their benefits, lost all their money. They've moved
Yeah.
away.
That was another thing. SAG took away our health that they
So
guaranteed us
Directors Guild
in
did
our
too, right.
old age.
Yes.
And
Directors
it's
Guild did that to me too. They
yeah,
said the same thing.
we were
"I'm
talking
sorry,
about
you
that.
didn't make enough money to have lifetime benefits. Why don't we say that I've been a member for 33 years?" And I'm like you, I have young children, and they canceled my children's health insurance.
Yes.
There is no explanation for this moment in Hollywood, and we all want it back. Could you imagine if they said to you, "Oh, we're gonna shoot your beautiful American story in Bulgaria?" But it's not unheard of. I've explained many times, there's no HR department in Hollywood. We didn't get a notice that said, "Things are changing, we're making some cuts, and things are gonna slow down, and you're all gonna lose your benefits. Oh, by the way, and your paychecks." I'm trying to create a space where people like you and me just say, "We're still here. Hi,
All
don't
those
forget about us."
movies that were made in the 50s and the 60s, the union went to those kids performing in those that all actors. They gave up their residuals because the deal was we'll give you lifetime health care. So they never got residuals for all those years because they were going to give us health care. And then they took it away.
I'm pretty devastated by that subject.
Hmm.
I have so many friends that are hurting on so many levels. I went to buy a car in March. My daughter's car caught on fire. Her Prius caught on fire. The battery exploded and car caught on fire. I had to go get a new car. I went to a couple dealerships and some handsome guy took me for a drive and it was the wrong car. And I said, "I think this isn't the right car." And he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just started here." I I I said, "What'd you do before?" And he said, "I was a cameraman." And I
Oh,
go, "Like a cameraman, like in Local 600?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "I haven't worked in 2 years. I can't do this anymore." And so he started selling cars, working as a cameraman for 33 years on a sitcom.
wow.
And he said his union told him that there were near 6,000 members in Los Angeles, and 48 people had worked in the past couple of months. 48 of 6,000. I'm trying just to raise awareness, like Lord of the Flies, the plane gone down, and who's in charge? And we don't have answers. And God bless that you and I are at least at the other end. Could you imagine just
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
horrendous. So anyway, I am really grateful to talk to you,
Me
and
too.
I wanna thank you for being a guest on my show and all your wisdom and your chapters and experience. I wanna have you back to talk about when the movie's coming out.
Okay, we'll
So,
do it.
I
We'll
can't
do
wait
it.
for publicity. Thank you to my guest,
Uh,
Georgia Durante, and I can't wait to have her back. Please like and follow, subscribe. Catch us on YouTube, Spotify, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, all wherever you get your podcasts.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Okay,
Thank you,
sweetie.
Georgia.
Thank you.